regarding TV programs you watch, videos, the music you listen to. There are bad choices that are involved in sometimes how we spend our money. If there were 100 rules out there, most of us would feel, well, as long as we're observing all but 5 or 6 of them, we think we're doing pretty good. If there are 10 commandments, we feel, well, I'm not such a bad person if I only break 2 or 3. And the first man and woman were told there's only one commandment they were given, and so they chose to break that one. They were told it's just they could eat anything they wanted except from a particular tree. And in a spirit of pride and of defiance, they decide we're going to do whatever we want. When we break God's commands, God is willing to forgive us time and time again. When we break society's laws, well, sometimes people are willing to forgive us then. When we break nature's laws, nature never forgives. But we come to deal with God and God's commands, God's rules for living. God is merciful, God is kind, God is gracious. We have only to admit to our sin, plead for God's mercy, and ask for God to give us a clean heart and a steadfast spirit. And there it is, it's done. I'd like to take a few moments to explore what are some of the offenses against God that we might be culpable of. Over the centuries, the church has put together and abbreviated through what we refer to as the 7 deadly sins, all kinds of offenses that might occur against God. And so there's the sin of pride or arrogance. There's the sin of lust and of gluttony. There's the sin of anger and of envy. There's the sin of greed and of laziness or sloth. And over the years, what I've done is to associate the sins with parts of the body because I forget them all the time. And so pride has to do with our head. Our head refers to our arrogance, defiance of the rules, wanting to do things our way all the time. And lust has to do with breaking sexual boundaries. Gluttony has to do with eating or drinking too much of the wrong stuff. Anger is not the feeling of anger, which is fine, but the ways in which we, in inappropriate ways, express those kinds of feelings through our throat. The way that we oftentimes lash out at people and demean them, and even abuse them. And then the heart represents envy, wanting what others have got. And the hands come to represent greed. It's mine and I'm going to keep it just for me. And our feet represent our lack of initiative, our laziness. We're not willing to take another step. And so our pride has to do with deciding, I'm going to do whatever I want, and no one's going to tell me what to do. And my way or no way. And it's the realm where we got to be in control. And we're going to manipulate and exploit to our own personal satisfaction. A great offense against God. And then the breaking of sexual boundaries. We live in a society where all kinds of license is given. And promiscuity continues unabated. And God's rules regarding sexual boundaries are all about to make life healthy and safe and good and loving. And then the mouth we associate with eating or drinking too much of the wrong things, like reaching for that donut or pastry when something else on occasion might be a little better for our health. It's about watching, not letting ourselves become inebriated in any way or afflicted with the effects of drugs. And then our throat comes to refer to the anger that so oftentimes is misapplied, is poorly expressed, that gets hurtful to the people around us. And then our hearts represent envy. And I like this example. Someone says, I'm going on a cruise. The envious person is going to say something like, whoa, I guess you've got the big bucks, haven't you? That's envy. And the antidote is to say, that's terrific. I'm so glad for you. I think you're going to have a great time. Greed has to do with thinking, I don't want to give and I'm not going to give because everything I've got belongs to me. And it's a poisonous kind of attitude, which is why it's an offense against God. And then our feet, the failure to take initiative. If they don't come and call me, I'm not going to call them. It's all about failing to be enterprising in our lives and realize there's so much more that we can become. It's not going to happen if we just stay home and sit on a sofa. Well, here's the test now, because as I point to different parts of my body, I'm going to ask you to tell me what deadly sin we're referring to.
Pride, lust, gluttony, anger, envy, greed, sloth.
You got 100% you pass. Wow. Imagine 9, 3/4, 10 in the morning on a Sunday morning and you pass the test. Jesus is faced with temptations to these and so many other ways of offending God. And Jesus resists the temptations. Jesus is tempted to use his energies and his powers for his own self and for his own well-being. And decides, no, I'm going to use my energies in order to change water to wine for those who would otherwise be embarrassed by the lack of provision at their wedding. Jesus chooses to use his energies and his powers to multiply bread and fish for the hungry crowds. And so Jesus chooses to live as a man for others, rather than to forever look to see what's in it for me. A second temptation Jesus faces is to be reckless. Jesus will take risks, lots of them, in the course of his life. But it's one thing to take calculated risks. It's another one to go off to a temple wall and to jump off, thinking that God's going to save us. So Jesus resists the temptation to get reckless in his life. And the third temptation, to worship Satan rather than God, is to embrace and to adore, to worship, to set as a priority and our first love things, entertainment, power, prestige, control, money, ahead of the one who has furnished us all these things and wants them for our good and well-being. Jesus chooses to allow for God to be the most important reality of his life, so that he would take time for prayer and for worship and for adoration. When we come to Mass, we come to receive Jesus, because in the end we want to be able to live in his semblance, to be pleasing to God, to overcome all the temptations we inevitably have week after week to sin and to offending God and to our failures in love. And we beseech the Lord God to continue day after day throughout these coming days to fill us with his mercy, to give us a clean heart, and to provide for us a steadfast spirit.